Hey, everybody. Happy New Year and welcome to this episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Got a lot of stuff coming up this year for you. Also, I hope you're checking out the show notes. I just released the beta version of Start the Conversation, Get the Meeting. Now, this is both for marketing and sales. This is outbound marketing, either using email, social, whatever means possible, connecting it up with your content strategy. Also for salespeople, if you're hiring these sales development reps and paying them, literally thousands of dollars to get a single meeting, I can show you how to do it on pennies on the dollar. So check out the show notes, start the conversation, get the meeting. Now, let's get into the interview. We're going to be talking today about customer success. Customer success is turning into this critical part of business that we overlooked for so long. We had customer support and, sales would get the customer and then hopefully, consulting and implementation would happen. And then if they had a problem, customer support would answer their problem. But we need to do more than that. Because, especially when we're selling something that's complicated or new or requires connecting up with other things or just it changes the way people do business. So we're going to get into that conversation. I think this role is critical today, especially, anytime you get into a monthly or an annual contract where you really need your customers talking about you. And I'm going to be doing a lot of episodes about this, about smarter ways of selling and marketing in 2018. Let's get into the interview. Hey, Sharad, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I actually am a Canadian that grew up in London and then ended up here on the West Coast in San Francisco about 5 years ago. I'm the VP of Customer Success at a company called Leadspace. Leadspace has the first B2B audience management platform. So we do everything from data management to predictive analytics to kind of net new deliveries. So that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. And what does a VP of Customer Success do?
Sure. I think it changes from day to day. That's a very broad question, but I'll tell you what I do. A lot of what we're focused on is ensuring, at the heart of it, is ensuring that we are aligned with customers' business objectives and that we're actually helping them or enabling them to use our platform in a way that's going to get them closer to ROI or what they're trying to achieve. So maybe I can boil that down one. So rather than just teaching them how to use our technology, we really align with what they're trying to do. We work with sales and marketing. So what sales is trying to do, and that might be have more qualified leads. And then we work with them to show them how they can use our platform in order to be successful. So that's kind of the essence of customer success versus support or something a bit more reactive.
And what do you run into? Like you get, let's say, a new account, sales has closed it, and the customer wants to get the value as fast as possible. What's the process you take them through?
Yeah, so we actually, something that we track is time to value, which is really important that a customer doesn't feel lost in an implementation. And if you have a light touch technology that takes a day, that's fairly straightforward, or it can be. For us, though, our implementations can take a little bit longer because we're API driven. So one of the things that's most important for us is that in our kickoff call, we establish what a quick win is for the customer. And it might be, we're going to do all these different things together, but actually what I really just need is I just need employee size in my database in order to be able to segment it for my sales team. So we work to get them there as quickly as possible so they can say, yes, I have received value, and they don't feel completely overwhelmed by the implementation process, rather than kind of having value be received at the end of a 2-month potentially process where for smaller companies that can be a little bit overwhelming. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we really have kind of these milestones of time to value that happen within the onboarding.
And who on the customer side gets involved? It's probably a lot of people, isn't it?
Can be. I've seen it done different ways. With us, we actually have a CSM who from the moment the deal is closed owns the relationship and also does the implementation. So we have an integrations team that works alongside them, but they really are the owner and the kind of the quarterback of the whole implementation process. And then in the past, we've had an onboarding team who essentially owns that from the second it closes, goes through a very standardized onboarding, and then hands that over to a CSM. So depends on the size of your organization, but currently we have a CSM who owns that whole piece.
And is it typically marketing or sales on the customer side that wants your product or uses it?
Historically, we worked with marketing primarily because we started out by kind of having APIs that plugged into Marketo and Eloqua. So we're working with a lot of VPs of demand gen, sometimes CMOs, marketing teams. But as we've evolved, we've really gotten into the data management space. So really about cleaning and improving CRM data specifically. So then we start to work a lot more with sales in those instances. So it's kind of a blend of both now.
And do you need technical people on their end, or is it super simple? Or it sounds like. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no problem. So we tend to work with sales ops and marketing ops.
And are they technical enough, or do you need to get IT involved, or?
They are technical enough. Our APIs are really easy to integrate. So it's like a 1 hour type process. It's more kind of determining how the data is going to live in their systems and what best practices are that takes more time on the implementation. The integration itself takes about an hour.
And what do you run into, or how do you manage it, like when they're not ready, or they thought they were ready, but the people who really do the work aren't ready? Has that ever happened?
It does, for sure. Yeah, and we absolutely look at sort of time to implementation to catch things that are starting to drag between stages. So we use Gainsight for all of our tracking, and we have different onboarding tasks. And when those start to run long, then we can begin to see where things are dragging and do troubleshooting in those areas. And it can be for a number of different reasons. But, we did a lot of customer experience mapping to determine where are the spots where customers maybe get analysis paralysis or decide that they don't want to have to deal with this. And we've been going through a journey of really finding the spots where customers seem to get stuck and kind of innovating as a customer success team and as a wider organization on how we make those time and points easier for the customer. So at a macro level, I would really recommend that. I think at a micro level, it oftentimes means the CSM will start by just with value adds of, hey, reminding them what their business objectives are, reminding them the value of continue going in this, potentially looping back in the buyer if we're having problems with the people that we're supposed to be working with, not necessarily wanting to engage or having their priorities shifted. And then if needed, then they'll loop me back in and I'll try and engage with an executive. So it's kind of the levels of plays that we go through to get things back on track.
And let's say the implementation is complete. Do you still, are you support as well as customer success, or is that all the same thing?
We do have support. The majority of things, so I forgot my password, I have a question about this data point, will oftentimes go through support. My integration seems to be wrong with it today. But then the CSM continues to really quarterback that relationship. So the engagement model will vary depending on the size of the customer. A customer like a Microsoft, we might speak to every week because there's a lot of initiatives going on, whereas some of our smaller customers may only really need support once a month. And that might be ensuring that we're aligned on new marketing campaigns or new sales initiatives that are happening and ensuring that they have got the support they need from us and the data that they need to be successful in those initiatives.
And how do you get along with sales? Now, do you get into who owns the account issues?
No, we don't. I certainly have seen that in the past, but we actually have a land and expand. So the sales owns the relationship with us. So there's no kind of, well, is it mine? Is it yours? It really is both of ours. It's kind of a both and, which means that we got to work through things because sometimes there is mixed opinions on who should be handling something a certain way. And it just means that we have to talk it through, which, we're still kind of agile enough as an organization that we can make that happen. But even as you grow in previous companies where there's kind of 90 CSMs and sales orgs that are double this size, you still, I think that kind of ownership of the customer and keeping aligned with the fact that we're still our goal is the same. We're trying to make the customer successful. I think that's key in keeping alignment with that kind of mindset. And then also too, I think the alignment of the leadership is really important. So ultimately, I believe that a lot of my success at Leadspace comes down to my relationship with our VP of sales and ensuring that he and I stay aligned so that we're both on the same page and there's not kind of mixed messages that are coming from us down to our teams.
And do you only get involved once the deal is closed, or is pre-sales part of your responsibility?
It is not. We have sales engineers that will run the pre-sales, like very technical sales engineers who will assist the sales team in a pre-sales. But we'll oftentimes jump on the phone if a customer wants to talk about what the engagement will look like post sales. We'll jump on whenever it's helpful, but we don't actually get deeply involved until the sales closed.
And how do you get compensated? Not you specifically, but how should? Do you have a W-2 available?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So everybody does. I think the interesting things when it comes to customer success is the MBOs. So like, how do you set up their MBOs and variables? And I've seen it done a lot of different ways. At Leadspace, the way that we do it at the moment is 70% based on gross renewal. So even though the CSM isn't necessarily signing the renewal paperwork, everyone knows that the success of the customer has an awful lot to do with how the customer is handled, and how the customer is really made successful, for lack of a better phrase. So I think gross renewal is a really key part. So we do look at the numbers matter. And then 20% of their variable is based on timely onboarding, or actually more specifically time to value. So we really are looking to improve that time to value. So it's a couple of weeks or a month even for our large customers, even if onboarding takes longer than that. And then the third piece, that's 10%, is actually advocacy events. So that is a blog post or a testimonial or a webinar or something that the CSM actually generates from their customer base on a quarterly basis.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I haven't heard that one.
It's awesome. I would recommend it highly, because the CSMs are in there every day talking to customers who have great things to say, and sometimes it's hard to bubble those things back up.
And that's it. That's the person they're most likely to reciprocate with.
Right.
Yeah, because they're the ones that personally helping them, not just educating them, but making them look good.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, have you ever got into like the mismatch of like expectations? Because, every time anyone buys a product, right, what's in their head about what it can do and what it really does may not always match up. Is that something you run into?
Yeah, it does. The nice thing is, because we have this land and expand and the salesperson stays on the deal, we don't really get the over the fencing of the promises of things that just cannot be delivered, which is nice. So we don't have that problem. But for sure, there is still misalignment when it comes to what the customer in their head believed this was going to look like versus what it does look like. And I think a lot of that comes down to ensuring that we stay hyper close to them, particularly through the onboarding, where a lot of these things are being discovered. So we actually have, we use Reich, which is an onboarding kind of project management that's collaborative. So we invite the customers to this project plan, and we kind of talk them through the detail of what this is going to look like. And we try and go in and help educate them on what the process is as quickly as possible. And then kind of dig out their expectations on what this is going to look like as quickly as we can, in case there is misalignment, so we can begin to address that. Because I think if it's caught up front, and then it's a much easier to deal with, rather than kind of going through a deep implementation and then getting to the end and the customer discovering that it doesn't look like what they thought it was going to look like.
And who do you report to? Is it the CEO? Is it the chief revenue officer? Where do you guys fit in?
I report to the CEO.
Okay. And do you think that's the right model?
I think it depends on the size of the company. For us, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. But I've definitely seen people reporting into CCOs if you have them, or CROs if not. And I like the idea in a larger organization of having sales and success under a CRO. So it's kind of one umbrella where you really are working together.
And why do you think it took the industry so long to come up with this role?
I'm not sure. I mean, Salesforce kind of championed this quite some time ago. Actually, and I may be mistaken, but I feel like some of the trend has to do with actually the emergence of the customer success platforms and the championing that companies like Gainsight and Tatango have done of the customer success industry. I was an early adopter of Gainsight at a previous company, and I went to one of their first conferences. I think it was something like 300 people. And there are thousands that go now, and I really do think a lot of that has to do with how well they have championed the space. There's a lot of other factors too, of course. But as companies are becoming more educated on things like churn, and as there's this more progression from on-prem to SaaS, and all of these different factors that of course come into play. But I really do think that customer success and the awareness of it has had a lot to do with the people who've been championing it and the platforms that have been.
And that's it, because I remember back in the 90s, software companies would only do it, if there were like run times, basically more seats or more instances or more revenue other than the maintenance. And we always ran into, get them to buy consulting. Well,
Right.
that's not an easy sell, right? When you say, "Oh, it's so easy to use, and you should have us be on site," you know.
Right. And there's a lot more competition than there was then as well. So I think that's something that we're having to learn, that it really does come, your technology won't just take care of itself. And if you just hand it over to a customer, it does happen, but it's very rare in that it just becomes so sticky that everyone is completely successful on it. It doesn't need that guidance.
And how do you work with marketing? You gave me one great example where you're trying to get a piece of content out of the customer. What other types of things have you found to be successful with marketing?
So we do kind of a blend of customer marketing and also outbound marketing. So I think for the customer marketing that we do, one of the pieces that's been really successful is actually just kind of best practices. So on a monthly basis, we send out a note to our customers with links to new articles that we've created in the knowledge base. And actually, my team does a lot of the creation of these articles. So it kind of is, hey, here's what good could look like. Here's some new things that we've discovered. So rather than kind of just trying to blast them with information about Leadspace, we try and constantly create content that is best practices in, I don't know, lead routing in Salesforce using a particular data field or whatever it might be, or how to deal with invalid emails on your inbound through Marketo or whatever it might be. But actually really beginning to kind of give back and give value around how a sales ops person could be more successful or a marketing ops person could be more successful has really worked for us.
And how about as far as finding, the people for your team? Since it's so new, it's not really support, it's not really pre-sales. You have to have, a good personality. You have to be empathetic. You have to be persuasive as well.
For sure. And because we're a data company, essentially, you also have to be analytical. So one of the nice things about the Bay Area is that the customer success model is a lot more baked here, and so there is a lot more resource. But at the same time, finding a good person, to your point, can be really hard. So we kind of have gone through multiple iterations of determining how do we best really interview a CSM. I think some of that can be, in my mind, some of the most challenging is what is the right interview. We actually do a model where we have a potential CSM come in and do a mock demo of a technology. So we get to see how they explain things and break things down. And then we also have them do a mock business review. So we get to see them kind of present, and we give them a data set and a story around it to kind of see if they have the ability to understand the data and present it in a story fashion back. So that's helped for sure. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's been successful for us.
And what characteristics, other than being able to present and solve problems, have really, separated your A players from your B players?
Oh, we don't have any B players. There's going to be people who are listening to this.
Oh, sorry. Every time I talk to a sales leader, they always, those B players.
But I think, to answer your question another way, the ones who are really successful, and this is true in previous roles too, are the ones who are willing to really dig into the data and better understand it at a deeper level. So previous to this, I worked for a B2B marketing platform. And it was, again, very data driven. And so I think the CSMs are the ones who are willing to go in and really, truly understand not just the technology and how to do an integration, but also understand the data and be able to tell that story to our customers are the ones who do well. So it does take an ability and a willingness to kind of get in there and really look at the data.
Right, because that expand part of the role is really, pretty close to a sales role in a sense, not like, pitching a product, but looking for additional problems, additional use cases, and then kind of convincing them to explore them. That must take up a lot of time, or it must be a powerful capability of your team.
Absolutely. Yeah. And hopefully it isn't even convincing. If the CSM is truly aligned with what the customer is looking to do within their business, not just what they want to use in the platform, then they would more naturally see opportunities for growth because they understand that you actually would benefit from this particular feature, or there might be other parties that would benefit from something, another business units, but it's genuine. Yeah, I think that's one of the true values of the kind of trusted advisor role is that, the customer knows that they're not trying to sell them something. They're genuinely looking for ways to improve their business.
And you also want to kind of probably lock out, the competition, especially in, the data space is kind of confusing, fragmented, and evolving. And applying AI to it is certainly the future. But, I think getting them to use the product in a much more broad, creative use cases, I think would be, really powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we actually, you may know this, but we actually just yesterday announced our Series C. We closed 21 million, which we're very excited about. And a lot of that's going to go towards additional automation. So really growing both our sales and marketing, but also to really driving the product forward. And the big focus for us, because we feel very good about our data, is actually is how do we make this even more sticky in their systems? How do we build more automated workflows that just enables a customer to press a button and have the data be live and making their life easier in their CRM or their marketing automation? So that's a huge focus for us. Because to your point, I think if you just are taking data and plugging it in, and then you're expected to kind of figure out what to do on top of that data, it's hard. And it's hard to, people don't have kind of imaginations for what they can do with your data. You need to imagine that for them.
Hey, give us an example of that, because I love this part of it, because I grew up in sales where you had no data.
Yeah.
Yeah, a phone book. And I remember when LinkedIn came out, I go, wow, this is online. It's not on paper anymore. And now you get, things like what you're doing, the predictive stuff, all the being able to refresh and clean your data and pretty much find out almost anything about anybody.
Yes, which is incredible for sure. And the time that it saves, sales and marketing organizations is outstanding, really, from having to, rather than having to look on LinkedIn to see a company size, we from all of our data sources can aggregate that and give you an accurate, company size. But to answer your question on kind of some of the activation things, I'll give you one use case. We actually work with one of the flags that we give in our data, rather, is when a person has moved. So we can actually see when you go to refresh a record as part of your data management process that Sherrod Patching has moved and she's no longer at Leadspace. She's at this new company, which of course is very valuable, both to the sales organizations to know that this person has left, also to know that they're in a new account that you potentially want to look into. And then, of course, all the additional pieces, too. Like, if they're your champion, you'd want to know those pieces from a customer success standpoint also. But what to do with that information can be quite hard for sales, because essentially what you need to do is retire that lead or contact in the existing account, create a lead or contact in the new account, which is a pain and nobody really wants to do it. So we've built an automated workflow that essentially, as soon as we see a record is moved, does the retiring of the lead or contact and does the creation of the new lead or contact. And things like that just take our data and make it much more operational, which is our goal.
And how about as far as helping your clients move faster? Because all this capability being new requires them to do stuff and to change and to look at the world in a different way. Do you find it hard to get them to have the same kind of a momentum that you'd like them to have?
Not always. Sometimes it depends on the size of the organization, but I mean, every customer will come to us with a pain. So, and that pain can be met usually fairly quickly, and it is something that they can implement. So there might be workflows that are going to take a little bit more time because it means adoption. But an easy one might just be at the moment, because every sales team segments based on something. They might base on geo, they might base on revenue or employee size, but every sales organization of size segments on something. So all we're doing is really adding data into that existing workflow that makes their segmentation more accurate and more and quicker, really. So it might just be that we provide that in their CRM, or it means we provide it on an inbound lead so that you don't have an SDR having to go out and find that information. So you're not necessarily reinventing the wheel or having them introduce new business processes. You're making existing business processes more effective. And then you can layer on top of that with new things they may want to introduce.
And is there a particular use case that you've really fallen in love with, being able to leverage this data to really increase, leads and revenue?
Yeah, there's a few actually. I think one that's really fun at the moment is we have lookalike modeling. And what lookalike modeling enables us to do is take actually a small amount of input data and then find other companies that look just like that company. And we're actually using AI and a large amount of signals to actually find that. So the accuracy of the companies that we find is fantastic. And we're really excited by the results that we're getting. It's a newer feature for us. But essentially, the way that this really becomes exciting is companies trying to build out their ABM for next year or their named account list. they have 50 and they need to find more. And there's so much time that goes into choosing that named account list, and so much sensitivity, of course, around those, because you're going to spend a whole year focusing on those accounts. So we can take just a small amount, like those 50 accounts, and actually come back with 150 or 1,000 more accounts that look just like it, that solves or saves the sales team a huge amount of time, and actually really sets them up to be successful. And we, of course, can also help with all the support around that. But ultimately, that's one of the ones I think that we're finding really exciting in supporting the ABM strategy as we move into next year.
Cool. Hey, I really appreciate your time today. If people want to learn more about you and what you're doing, as well as your company, where should they go?
Oh, they can, by all means, email me. It's Sherrod, SHERROD, at leadspace.com, or you can find us at leadspace.com.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Hey, a couple big announcements. Pipedrive just released a new capability, Smart Contacts. Basically, any contact with an email address, they'll go out and search the internet and find out all this information about additional contacts, social contacts, blog posts, all this stuff. They're rolling it out slowly, but check it out at pipedrive.com/Brian and sign up and get a free trial. Also, we're doing a lot of work with Nudge.ai about really how to sell smarter. It's all this hustle and grind talk, but what we're finding out is it's not working. People are becoming a little annoyed with salespeople who are all about themselves instead of about the customer. So we're going to be talking about how do you sell effectively today when everybody's busy and noisy and more humanistic. And that's really what my course is about. I found a system of being able to start conversations with people and build them into meetings. Because you really want to have a meeting with somebody who's qualified and interested. What we have to find is a way of building that interest, and it can't be done in a single email or a cold call or a social touch or some content. It has to be done in a systematic way over a period of time. And some people may say it's slower, but if it's so much more effective, then it's really faster. And I'm talking to all these SDRs, sales development reps, and they're just like crushed because their managers are pushing them to do all these touches, and it's getting the exact opposite result that everybody wants. What we want is meetings with real people who have real interest and who are qualified to buy our product. Also, check out covideo.com. We're going to be doing a lot of work in 2018 with Covideo. Video emails are the way to go. But the one thing I constantly hear from the sales development reps is when we do video, it works. You have to be a little creative and change it up every now and then. But if you do video, it's much more effective than the text email because it shows a little bit of investment in there. That's it. We'll really appreciate it. Connect up with me on LinkedIn, and we'll see you next time.